I was just like this idea I became obsessed with, and I found a studio in the city of Syracuse and rented it for a day and just like went in there with the guitar. That was like the days of Jewel, you know, those
Oh,
are the days of
sure.
like the songwriter who just went in with guitar. So
Why, hello.
hi, Adam.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm 1 second. Sorry, it's something in my throat. They want to like in your ear. So,
If you did, I would have been okay with
oh,
it.
that's good. Okay. Well, I appreciate you being here. This is awesome. Thank you so
Yeah.
much. Of
Thanks for having me.
course. This is about you and your journey in music, and we'll talk about the new EP you have coming out as well.
Great.
Cool. So talk to me, born and raised, did I see New York area?
Yep. Syracuse, New York.
Talk to me about that a little bit.
So funny. The thought I just had was I used to say all the time, I'm from upstate New York, but then I lived in New York City and had to adjust for all the New York City folks calling
Oh, okay.
Kingston upstate. So now I'm like Central New York. It was very snowy, which at the time was quite a magical thing that I've appreciated a lot looking back.
Hmm.
Just like being in deep blizzards and building like little mouse tunnels with my brother and sister in the front lawn because it was like 6 feet of snow.
Oh,
Just
wow.
really crazy amount of snow.
I interviewed somebody yesterday, the day before, that was living in Alaska for a short period of time, and he was like, "Yeah, like we would just dig mazes in the yard, like that's how they entertain themselves."
That was it. We'd put on like snowsuits and like crawl through these little tunnels that we'd built.
That's pretty awesome, I will say.
Yeah. Yeah. Looking back, it definitely was kind of a certain magic.
Sure. I mean, I think you're in LA now, or you
Yes, I am.
Okay, so I'm from San Diego originally. I'm recently moved, or I guess like a little over a year ago. My
Mhm.
family and I, we moved to Nashville area, or south of Nashville. And so my kids are seeing snow for the first time. And it's so cool. Like I loved seeing it come down. And I have a neighbor across the street that's from Illinois, and he's like so over it. Like I thought I moved away from the snow.
Wow. Yeah,
But
I
for us, it was like, oh my gosh, this is so awesome.
totally the wonder.
Right. It's so cool. Like I can't imagine growing up in that much snow to where you could dig yourself tunnels. Well, you said two siblings. Is anyone else musical in your family at all?
Nope.
Parents?
Nope.
No? Okay. What drew you to music?
Maybe it was the snow. I think growing up in Syracuse, we had so many blizzards and would often get snowed in.
Hmm.
And those were quite creative periods for me, just like from a very young age to have to I'm thinking about it now because with the pandemic, that was another stage of being closed in where
Yeah.
I had no problem like being really creative during it. I feel like growing up in Syracuse sort of prepared me for that.
Yeah. I was going to say, I did, from just what I've read about you, it seems like being kind of like alone, like isolated is kind of a happy space for you, in the sense of like, that's where you wrote your first record, right? It was similar situation.
Yeah, completely.
That's interesting. I want to get into that for sure. So, but what did you learn first? Like, were piano is the first thing that you learned as far as like music went, or like what was the first instrument you learned?
I'm self-taught. I was just learning to sing. I guess in high school I took a few guitar lessons and um, but like piano is something I learned along the way.
Okay.
I was
And
just obsessed with writing songs.
sure. So when did you start writing?
I made a record when I was, I think, in 11th grade.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
And
Um,
was that just obviously that wasn't the first record you put out, right?
no, I
No.
never put it out.
Okay.
I distributed it to my friends. No, the first record I put out like officially was Slow to Love, which I released in 2012.
Yeah, okay, that's what I was thinking. So this is a record that you just wrote, recorded, and
Yeah.
distributed amongst your friends in high school?
Yeah, I was like
Wow.
songwriting. Yeah, songwriting's always really Songwriting's always just been a super special place for me, and especially in those teenage years, that was an outlet that felt really soothing, I guess,
Mhm.
self-soothing.
Would you share those songs with, I mean, obviously with your friends and on this recording, but prior to that, were you sharing your songs with people?
No, I think it was something that kind of woke up in those teenage years, was that that was a desire I had to write songs. I didn't know.
Okay. Did you play out at all or play at
Yeah,
the school or talent shows, anything like that?
yeah, I play out. I've always had like a lot, and still do sometimes, like performance anxiety. So it's a
Hmm.
weird paradox that I live in, of like loving making music and then also struggling with sharing it. Um, so I would make my way out with a lot of
Okay.
yeah, with a lot of trepidation.
Yeah. With that first record or the tape or whatever you put together in 11th grade, was that something you recorded in a studio or is it home recordings? Like,
Yeah.
how'd you get, oh,
I remember I went to a studio for a day. I don't know how I even put this together, thinking back. I was just like, this idea I became obsessed with, and I found a studio in the city of Syracuse. I rented it for a day and just like went in there with a guitar. That was like the days of Jewel, those
oh,
were the days of
sure.
like the songwriter who just went in with guitar. So I had a lot of role models of how that could go down.
Okay. Was Jewel a big one for you?
I think so. Yeah, yeah, definitely. Because her songs were so simple
Hmm.
on guitar. So it was like really easy to learn them. So that I think that was one reason I latched at that age.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you went in the studio and so that first record you released was just you and acoustic guitar.
Yep.
Wow.
9
You,
songs in one day.
oh my gosh, that's insane.
I think it was just like, I didn't know. I didn't know what to go into a studio was. I didn't even know that you could go for more than one day. I think it was
Right,
just,
right. You just go in there. Was it obviously had an engineer? Did you just do it all live?
yeah, I think we just did like 2 takes for every song. And I was like, cool. I'm
It's like, here
happy
you
with this.
go. Do you still have that demo somewhere, or do you have that recording somewhere?
It's somewhere in Syracuse. I definitely did not bring it out to LA.
You weren't going to shop it around.
No, like maybe every 10 years I'll listen to it and be like mostly cringe, but then there's also like this real resilience in it that I appreciate, and like the seeds of something.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So from there, you knew that you wanted to pursue music, it sounds like. I mean, being in
Mhm.
11th grade, putting out a record like that, where did you go from there? Did you try to attend college for music? I did see you did some traveling, right?
Yeah, I didn't, like I said, I never really formally studied music in college. I went to a school that had a music conservatory, and I think I was quite intimidated by the fact that I didn't have a formal education in it.
Hmm.
So I took I took sitar, and I kind of studied like ethnomusicology, but I didn't actually go into songwriting there, which I wish I did.
Was that
And
a
then
school in where was that? Like around New York area?
Oberlin in
Oh,
Ohio.
Oberlin. Oh yeah, no way.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Okay, so my grandmother, my dad's mom went to Oberlin.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like I have her report. She passed away when I was like 4. But my grandfather, his wife, passed away like 3 or 4 years ago, and he was like my hero. But we were going through his stuff, and I found my grandmom's report card from Oberlin College. Like it was crazy. Just like it was just like this slip of paper like this big. And we went and visited it before. It's such a cool little town. Like it was just in the my family lives in or they're from Illyria. I don't know if you ever went through
Oh
there.
my gosh, of course. Illyria.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. So that's fairly close. I think it's only what, like 20 minutes or something like that to Oberlin.
That's the town. I think Toni Morrison, the author, is from Illyria. I'm pretty
Is he
sure.
really? I don't know. That's crazy.
Yeah. Wow. And that's so cool because Oberlin, I believe, was the first school to admit women.
I
I hope
think it
I'm-
was. I think it was too.
So how cool that your grandmother was probably like,
Well, she might have been one
early
of
in
the
it.
first people there, right? I mean, she went to school there, I think, in the early 40s. So I don't know when the school. I mean, it's. Now I want to do some deep dive because I didn't realize that. Now it makes sense. I think it was the first that let women in,
Yeah.
and she went for vocals. She was a singer.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So that's crazy. So, oh my gosh. And that's such a cool town. I went there with my grandfather because he wanted to show me like this, because I didn't even know this existed. I'm like, this is like a cool arts college in the middle of Ohio and like, outskirts of Cleveland. Like, what is this? And there's we went to this little like brewery type restaurant there on the corner. It was cool. It's such a cool little town.
Yeah, it's a really special place. Yeah, it was a formative time for sure.
What did you guys have to, I mean, there doesn't seem like there's a whole lot to do, like in the area that it's at. Did you like go out around, like, did you have to drive out to like I have uncles in Amherst, Amherst?
Yeah, I mean, there were people like the city, especially kids from the city, they would go a lot to Cleveland. But
Okay.
for me, it was like another Syracuse situation, right? Where there's nothing to do. So it's just like the perfect space to be hyper creative because you just need to create your own world.
Sure, sure.
Um, so that's what I felt like Oberlin was. It was like a bunch of people who were creating worlds together in the middle of Ohio.
Yeah, that's so cool. And like I said, it's such a cool, like, it's such a cool looking school. Wow. So did you went there for 4 years, or did you end up leaving there, or?
In the end, I only went there for 3 years because I went to another school first and then transferred out.
Okay. So did you go to Oberlin to pursue music then, it sounds like?
No, I didn't.
Oh,
I think subconsciously I was like, I want to be around musicians, and certainly all the musicians friends that I made there, were people that definitely, I think, yeah, that was a big part of my path after college, but I studied painting. I was a visual artist.
oh, cool. Do you still
Yeah,
paint?
I don't. It was a weird thing. I was like obsessively painting for 7 years of my life and then just stopped.
Oh, really? Interesting.
I don't know. There's not like much of a story there, except I just got really, I think I burnt out and lost interest.
Okay.
The collaborative aspect of music really enlivens me. And I think some of the solo-ness of painting is a lot.
Yeah. And where'd you go from? So you left Oberlin, you said a different school after Oberlin?
No, I went
Oh,
into Oakland, and
oh, you
then
went into Oberlin. Okay.
and
And then
then
from there, what was next for you?
a year, I did a year in San Francisco, and then I moved to New York.
Oh, wow. Okay. What did you do? I lived in San Francisco for a little bit too. Did you move to San Francisco just to kind of change the pace, pursue a different, or were you going there for music as well, or just?
Yeah, I had my friend Lesh Wierzinski. His band is called the California Honey Drops.
Okay.
He went to Oberlin. And when I graduated, I wasn't really sure what to do. And he was like, I think you should move out to San Francisco and start a band and play music here, and I'll help you. And so he did. I moved there and he mentored me, and I started like a little duo that I played with. And then I was like, I think it's time to move to New York.
Okay. How long did you play in the duo for?
Probably like most of the year. I think I did, yeah, maybe it was like a 9-month thing where I kind of saw what it like. I started to understand how to do that. We would play the Hotel Utah every week.
Okay.
Go there.
I know the spot. I never went there though.
Yeah, I don't know if it's around still, but it was like a very cool open mic, really supportive scene. And I started to see how that could work a bit.
Okay. And then from that group, did you end up is that where you started to kind of pursue a solo career?
Yeah, it was. We actually made an EP. The group was called Heaven with Your Boots On.
Okay.
And the person who recorded the EP, Nate, he's actually in that band Tune Yards, and he
Oh,
was
really?
from Oberlin. So that was,
Wow.
yeah, it was like more Oberlin connections.
That's cool. That's
Yeah.
cool. And then you went to traveled like the Himalayas? Is that what I was reading about you?
Yeah.
Or was
I guess
that later, or was
that was
that?
later. I moved to New York, and then I had like another band that I kind of took to its natural end. It was me sort of working through a lot of the kinks, I think, in
Mhm.
pursuing a music career while waitressing. And
Was that something you were taking, like you wanted that to be like the thing? Like, Were you
Hmm.
trying to get signed and like, touring and everything with that band in New York?
Yeah, I was definitely trying and couldn't like it just I couldn't figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't figure it out. And so then, yeah, so I think like 10, 11 years ago, I went to India, and my plan was actually to just stop pursuing music. And
Really?
yeah, that was my plan. I was like, I can't figure this out.
So
Um,
you just went there to what? Try to find what you wanted to do next? Find your next, yeah,
yeah, I
thing to do
bet
with your life, I guess.
I did. I wanted to get my yoga teacher training. I knew that was something I always wanted to do. And I wanted to do a Vipassana meditation at the main center there. It's like a 10-day silent meditation retreat.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
What was that like? I actually had a buddy that did something similar where he went somewhere and like you just don't speak for like a week. I think his was like 6 or 7 days, but 10
Yeah.
days you just kind of, is that, was that, I mean, that must have been so, was it difficult? Like, tell me about this.
Um, it was so surprising. I think it definitely was difficult. And also like what I found most surprising about it was that when we had to start talking again at the ninth day, because they have like a day where you begin talking to everybody on the course. So to integrate the process before you go home,
Hmm.
I didn't want to talk. That was what surprised me the most.
Really?
I felt so like at peace.
With
I was shocked.
Okay. Wow, that's so fascinating. Oh yeah, I was gonna say, did you almost like maybe the muscle memory would get weird there? I mean, I don't know.
My voice was definitely a bit higher. But I remember just being like the silence was so deeply peaceful that I think as soon as I started talking, I excused myself and then just had to cry for a little bit. I was
Oh
like
wow.
a lot to process. But
Yeah.
there's one in Massachusetts. There's a center in Shelburne, Massachusetts that I had done one at when I was like 26. And then a year later, I went to India and did one there.
Wow. And
Yeah.
then when you get back from there, is that when do you, because your sound is like so unique for your project.
Thank you.
Yeah. And was that something that you developed there, or was that similar to like when you were pursuing your first band in New York? Does it sound anything like what you're doing now?
No, no, not at all. I think so. What happened in India was I was traveling around for a bit. I did some teacher training. I dropped out of yoga training, teacher training school there, and I ended up finding a really amazing teacher later on. And I ended up finding this Tibetan Institute for Performing Arts,
Hmm.
which is a school, and I started studying singing there when in that first trip to India. I heard I the way I found out about it was I heard somebody singing while I was walking, and the singing was so ethereal.
Oh, interesting. Is it just totally different than anything you had ever heard before?
Completely like mind bending. I didn't know that the human voice could do that. um I was with a friend. I was like, hey, do you mind if we check out what that singing is? I like need to know.
Right, right.
And when I got there, yeah, I ended up learning about Tibetan singing, and they were teaching all sorts of Tibetan traditional Tibetan instruments and theater and opera. And yeah, I asked if I could start studying there. And that really changed my voice because all of a sudden I realized I could sing super high notes that I never had access to or thought
Mhm.
was possible. And it really opened something up for me.
Did you end up staying there for a while? Like, I mean, how long did you study at the school for?
Yeah, so that was the beginning of like a longer relationship. The teacher who agreed to take me on was like, look, I can teach you one song. We'll start with one song. And in order to learn that song, you have to come every day for a month for an hour. So
Wow. So you had essentially just like, did you, when you went out there, were you going with a one-way ticket knowing that you wanted to maybe stay, or like, I
no,
mean, for me, I would think like if I was going to another country, And then I'm like, oh, this seems like something cool. And he's like, you got to come back every day for a month. And it's like, okay, now I got to figure out a place to live. Like, I got to get a job. Like, are all these things that like start running through your mind?
Totally. I mean, I was only planning to be in this town for 2 days, but I remember the thing is, I remember that being such an instant commitment. Like it was zero, doubtless. I was like 100% yes, I want to stay here and I'll, change my plans. And it was just so clearly something I needed to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did that. And then I started coming back like every other year. I would go back and study pretty much the same thing. I would just go to that one place in India and study for like, a month to 6 weeks with that teacher.
Wow. And then is that when you started to kind of use that style? Like, is that similar to the style that you use now in your songs?
I think it's integrated, like it's just a part of my voice. I
Okay.
was singing from a much lower space before, like what they would call lower placement.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and now I sing from a much higher placement, and it's definitely from everything I learned there.
And is that like, because on your website, you say that you're a sound healer. Is that something that kind of comes from that?
Definitely
Okay.
learning how to use my voice in that way.
Like to explain that to me. And that, because that's something I was fascinated by. I was just like, I don't know, remember like a couple of years ago, it was just like, I got in some rabbit hole on YouTube and then I found like different frequencies can stimulate different parts of your brain, like the vagus nerve. And like, I'm just like, whoa, this is like crazy. And like you put your headphones on and like one, it's like one frequency in one ear is at a certain level and the other's at a different level. And then like, and I was like, this is crazy. And then I was looking at your Spotify, and then you have a record that's in like 432 hertz. And I remember seeing something about that because mainly stuff that you hear recorded or like WAV files or MP3s are in 440. So I'm
Mhm.
like, oh, like what's this 430? So I'm Googling that and like, is that all kind of like, did you learn about different frequencies? Like, tell me about like this whole, is that all incorporated the sound healing or am I just going totally on tangent?
No, I mean, it's just things that I've learned along the way.
Okay.
When we were making that record, I remember I actually did a lot of research on 432 hertz at the time because uh, I wanted to make sure it wasn't just woo, like
Hmm.
made up woo, fake news. Uh,
Right.
but there is a lot of research that's been done where they've tested it and they've tested 432 hertz clinically that shows listening to music at 432 hertz does decrease like anxiety symptoms.
That's so crazy. So like when you say sound healer, are you going with those like that? Like tell me, I guess you explain it to me. I have no idea. I'm just spouting because it's just so fascinating to me. Like, is that something that you take into consideration when you're recording a record? Like the hertz that you're being at what the song's coming out at or anything like that?
Definitely with the music that's more like specifically in this sound healing. Like I'm putting out another record probably later this year with Float Waves, the same person I did that first 432 hertz. And
Uh-huh.
we'll play with different frequencies for that. But the sound healing refers to kind of like a spectrum of instruments. I have like crystal singing bowls and
Okay.
gongs and percussion, and it's a mix of different things. People do like offer sound healing in different ways. I think one thing that I do that some don't is I use those instruments and then I also use my voice. And the idea is kind of what you were starting to riff on, that like everything is vibration and frequency, and music can be this sort of passive way that we can passive in that you don't have to do anything. It's not invasive. It's not, but it can restore harmony to the body just by being in the presence of certain instruments or frequencies.
Hmm.
And it sounds so woo, but I always say before I do sound healing, I'm like, you can come in with your skepticism and it's all good because it'll work nonetheless. And it usually does. Yeah.
Oh, so do you do sound healing like because like a sound
Sound bath.
yeah,
Yeah.
sound baths, right? Is where people kind of come together and they just kind of like it's almost like you're meditating and then somebody's playing like
Hmm.
different instruments, right? I mean, I can't remember who I interviewed, somebody that was putting on something like that in Los Angeles. Like I can't remember who it was though. but like it's like different instruments, right? That it's not, you're gonna go in, it's not like a show. It's like you go in to kind of meditate, right?
Yeah, it's a lot more experiential. I mean, there's some amazing sound baths, facilitators in LA. Um, but yeah, it's very experiential. People are lying down, and the lying down is supposed to promote this state of receptivity.
Mhm.
And yeah.
Is that something you learned? Do you play those like, do you play the instruments and kind of and run the, like, I don't even know what you would call it, like what the ceremony?
Yeah, definitely. I do. I have I mean, I have a sound bowl right here. I
Oh,
have
wow.
like 10 of these. I have a gong. I have all sorts of percussion and chimes and tuning forks, and yeah,
How
it's
long
really
did it take you to learn all that?
well, I think I was slowly learning it, right? Like I was learning it. I was learning how to do it with the voice through my teacher in India, through the Tibetan Lamo style, and then I was also learning about how music can work as a healing, because I was studying for many years, going down to Peru and learning um, about ayahuasca.
Oh, okay.
And a big part of the lineage that I was sitting in is one in which music is used as a way to activate healing um, through these songs that are called the Icaros. And so that was a big, like, mind-opening thing too, of like, wow, there are all these cultures where songs are really considered legitimate medicines and activation of music, of healing, of personal healing. So those two things were happening while I was touring as like an indie musician.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. So you're
Yeah.
learning all this, and and what were you touring, like that record, the first record you put out, or like where, like what, where were you at
Yeah.
as far as your music were going, that career path versus what you were doing there?
I mean, it was like I was living two different lives. Basically,
Okay.
anytime, because I toured and then I signed to Anti Records and I put out two records
Yeah.
there. And whenever I wasn't touring or working on a record and had some extra cash, I would be like investing in my kind of spiritual path.
Interesting. Yeah, like that's so fascinating to me. And did it take a while to learn how to play all the different instruments?
Yes, but it came really naturally, because basically at a certain point I was like, this is super unsustainable. I'm like having a secret spiritual life that is just like
Right,
so
right.
immense and important to me. And I'm keeping it separate because I don't understand how it can work with this other lifestyle that feels actually quite unhealthy.
Uh-huh. Were you
Like,
able to blend the two at all? Or did
yeah,
that?
and that's kind of what happened at the end of like 2018. I was like, I just want to focus on music as a healing practice. And there's this woman out in Joshua Tree who makes drums.
Mhm.
She does like drum ceremony where you go out there and you make a drum with her. And that was my beginning. I went out there for my birthday and made a drum with her.
Really?
Yeah. And then that was kind of like the start of my sound. It was so funny. It was like, that was quite the initiation. And then I just started learning from different people and getting instruments and playing and, yeah.
Wow. Okay. Well, to back up real quick, on that first record, "So to Love," tell me about putting that out. I mean, it's going back to the isolation thing. Is that something that did you, like, you recorded tell me about the recording of the record, right? It sounds like you like went to a cabin or something and you just kind of like isolated yourself. And what decision did you, like, what was the decision behind that, and how quickly were you able to put the record together?
That record came together so fast. It felt like deeply channeled.
Okay.
And and I knew it because for years, like I mentioned, I was in New York trying to make things happen with this other band. And writing every song just felt like this pushing a boulder uphill, like trying to squeeze inspiration out of nowhere.
Mhm.
And all of a sudden I got back from India and the songs were just like moving through me. Um, I would have a conversation with somebody and I was like, that's a song. I was finding inspiration everywhere. So I had like no option. I was like, this is it.
Right, right.
I've never been here before in this place. I need to make a record. And so, yeah, I rented a little cabin outside of Syracuse and went up there for just like a week to kind of figure out what I was going to do. And that's where I started. I just was writing songs, and I brought a little keyboard up there, and kind of the first song I wrote for that record is called Follow You Till.
Mm-hmm.
That one I wrote with guitar, and I just like made it on GarageBand, and that was so new to me. I was like, oh, I can record myself and I can write a song. I can do this all by myself, but obviously it would be great if I had somebody else to help me with this. So then
you end up hiring, you ended up having somebody come and record the record? So you didn't do the whole record on GarageBand?
I did not
Okay.
do the whole record in GarageBand, not do the whole record in that cabin. That was kind of just like my pre-production visioning, my visioning station. And I did do that song out there. And then when I was out there, I was like, I should call Adam. And Adam was my super old.
And then I answered. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, totally. And then you were like, yeah, we should do a podcast in 12 years.
Yeah, I'm like, yeah, like, we'll do that. So like, there's going to be this pandemic, and then we'll do it after the fact.
Yeah, exactly. No, my friend Adam Rhodes, who I grew up with, and is just an insane musician, really brilliant, sensitive person. And we recorded and wrote most of the rest of the record together.
Wow. And when that record's done, did you like knew you had something special? Did you try to then go out and just play those songs or tour those songs or pitch those songs to a record label? Like, what was the kind of the next step for you?
Yeah. I knew I had something different because we played, the first show we played was at Pianos spot in New York. And, and it was filled with people that I didn't know. And I was like, well, this is new, because for so long I'd been playing New York and with my old band. And it got to a point where I was like, I'm feeling bad about asking my friends to come to my shows.
Oh, right. Okay.
And all of a sudden there was like this organic thing that was happening, and everything kind of, it was like one thing to the next. And they say this about, I don't know, my friends, it's like every time you release a song, it has the potential to change your life, like writing and releasing it. And I think it does, even if only you know that you did it. But then there's something natural that comes where it also leads you on your own journey. And that's kind of what started happening with those songs, like from playing shows. We'd have managers show up, and, there was just like all sorts of things that were created from that.
That must have been pretty exciting though.
It was.
Oh yeah.
It was exciting. It was also an initiation. I mean, I didn't know anything about the music business.
I
didn't go to school from it. I didn't have anyone in my family. It was from Syracuse. So it was like super naive.
Did you have to learn pretty quickly?
Yeah, and I'm still learning, of course.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, it took you a handful of years to put out then that next record, which signed with Anti, right? Was it just grinding and touring and trying to write? Like, what was the path in between those two albums?
Yeah. So that first record that I released, I was like very obsessed with Licky Lee's record at the time.
Okay. Yeah.
And I looked at the record and saw that this guy Lasse Martin had mixed it. So I reached out to him. That was like my thing, was I was always willing to like be super rogue and just email people.
Yeah, put yourself out there. That's awesome.
Yeah, I just found his email and emailed him and was like, hey, this is my music. Would you be interested in mixing one of the songs on Slow to Love? And he did. And from mixing that, he mixed a song called Can't Leave You. He was like, actually, my wife and I are looking to start a publishing company with BMG.
Oh, and wow.
Yeah, why don't we sign you and bring you out to Sweden, and you can write with a bunch of our songwriters here, learn the Swedish way.
Wow.
So I did that.
Off a cold email.
Very good.
That's luck. Crazy. Wow. Okay. So then do you move out to Sweden or go out to Sweden to write?
yeah, so this is again like Swedish winter, you know, back to Syracuse and Oberlin, like just lockdown,
Your spot. Yeah.
5 hours of sunlight and like a day, just every day. I think I wrote 30 songs in a month.
Oh my gosh.
I felt sick. I felt so depleted afterwards.
Yeah. And
Um,
was Slow to Love done at this point? Was that record finished, or did some of these songs end up becoming a part of that album?
yeah, Slow to Live was done. It was out in the world. I didn't want to sign that. I wanted to self-release it because I was like, I know it's imperfect. I know it's raw. I
Mhm.
know there are things I want to change later, but it's so pure. And I just need to have a record of something I made that's from a very pure place.
Mhm.
So yeah, so this was in preparation for my second record. And then I got very lucky again with a cold rogue email, which is how we made the second record, because uh, Adam had come up with this amazing song. He had written the piano part, and then I wrote the lyrics. And we were both like, we have something super special, but we can't take it to the finish line together. We need somebody else who knows more about production than either of us.
Mhm.
And I sent it around to a few friends to be like, what do you think? And 2 out of 3 of them came back and were like, you should reach out to Justin Vernon of Bon Iver.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. And I had a manager at the time who was like, you know, you're not a very big artist. Like you shouldn't just wrote like, it was like, I
Shouldn't
wouldn't
be just rogue emailing people.
emailing people. And I did. And yeah, Justin's manager at the time reached out, like replied. I sent it and I had no expectation to ever hear back, of course. And then he
Right.
replied, was like, actually, I've heard your first record, which was so weird because I didn't think it was a really small, you know, record that we self-released on Bandcamp. Like,
Yeah. And for
and he
him
was
to
like,
find it. Wow.
yeah, he was like, I've actually heard Born Whole, the song, and we love this song that you sent us, and Justin would love to produce it.
Wow.
Yeah.
So did he produce that whole record then?
So he produced that song, and
Oh, he
then
produced the song. Okay. What song was that?
it's called The Wind.
Okay.
And you could hear it, like you can hear especially things he was doing at that time with like the OP1 that are
Uh-huh.
on that song. And then from that record, yeah, from that one song, I ended up going with Adam, my friend Adam, out to Wisconsin, and we made the second record with. He was there for some of the music, but it was mostly produced by BJ Burton and Sean Carey.
Really? That's so
Yeah.
cool. What
Yeah.
about so then what happened with the Swedish songs? They just didn't ever come out, or
Oh no, they came out like, you know, some of them didn't because I wrote 30, right? So we took like
right.
the best of them, and those were the songs that I used for after. So the guys from,
Oh,
yeah, like that whole camp basically produced the songs I'd written in Sweden.
that's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so then once that second record comes out, and then obviously that's The Wind is a huge, huge song. And you obviously knew there's something special there. Then, you know, he produces it. Are you signed with Anti? Was that must have been a big moment?
That was a big moment. It's very interesting because another super lucky, this was just like this extremely lucky time in my life that happened right before I went out to Wisconsin was this guy from Island Records UK, Nick Szymanski. He was actually Amy Winehouse's first manager.
Wow.
Heard 2 singles I'd made in between Slow to Love and After that we made for this small label called White Iris Records.
Mhm.
The songs were called New Lows and See Me Now. And he was like, I want you to come out to London to meet you. And so he flew me out to London and was like, I think we should make a record here on Island. And it was such a cool opportunity. But I ultimately decided at the same time, I had this amazing offer to go to Wisconsin and
Mhm.
do things a little bit more on my own terms. So that was sort of the 2 roads, major label and more independent.
Right. But Anti is such a cool label. I mean, obviously it's Epitaph is like it was because Epitaph is so straight up the middle with what they signed, right? I mean, it's
Yeah.
Bad Religion's label, and what they signed was just punk rock and that But then they put out Anti, which is a bunch of different genres of music.
Totally. And when I signed to Anti, so it was after we made the record, we sent it to Anti and they wanted to sign it. When I signed to them, it just felt like I felt like I was really at the right place.
Mm-hmm.
They have a lot of respect for artists doing their own thing and independence. And I really felt like I was honoring myself and my decisions and that it had worked out.
Mm-hmm. Does Greg Gaffin get involved at all? Did he get involved at all with that piece of it? Because he runs Epitaph, and I know he gets involved quite a bit with the artist and that process of it. Or was it when, I guess you had the record done, so he wouldn't, but you did put out another album with Anti, didn't you?
I did. I put out 2 records, and my main point of contact there's Andy Culkin,
Okay.
who's he's wonderful. And it was interesting when he first signed. After he was just getting into meditation,
Uh-huh.
so that was something we had in
All kind of
common.
bonded on.
Yeah, and it felt like, again, it just felt like another green light of like I want to be working with people who understand the full spectrum of what I'm trying to do here.
Uh-huh. Oh, it's Brett Gershwitz. I named the wrong Bad Religion member. I
No,
was like,
it's okay. I was like, I was like, did I miss someone at Anti all these years?
no. That was my fault. Because then I'm like, that wasn't right. I just wanted to clarify for everyone going, you're an idiot. Yeah. So okay, so he wasn't involved in it at all in that point, or when you were working through them. But that's still cool. I mean, what a cool label. You get signed to them, and then do you go on the road right away with, like, what was the benefit? I mean, aside from having them put the record out and everything else, like getting on Anti, how did that change your career?
I mean, I learned so much. Like, I learned so much about the music industry from kind of seeing how that worked, in ways that now, I'm back to being independent again. And
Mm-hmm.
I think I have just benefited so much from being on a label in terms of knowing how to be independent. It's interesting in that way. It's
Mm-hmm.
like being with a
Sure.
label gave me independence. But yeah, then we did a bunch of touring, and it's funny, when I was in Wisconsin, there was also another band there finishing their first record, and a band was Sylvan Esso.
Oh, okay.
So
Wow.
yeah, it was so they sang, Amelia sang on my record, and Nick from Sylvan Esso was playing bass on a few songs. And
Really?
yeah, and so then we went on tour with them for a few shows. I did a bunch of other touring in that time too.
Mm-hmm. And then you put out your next record. And what was the, like, that was 2018? Is that what I saw?
Mhm.
What was the milestone, would you say, from that album? Or how did it change?
I think probably what changed is that I was now living in California, and I was kind of returning to a more like folk inspirations,
Mhm.
songwriter inspiration. And I got to make that record in London with Jimmy Hogarth, who had
Wow.
worked on the Amy Winehouse Frank album. So that was really
Wow.
cool because, yeah, that was amazing because then I got to kind of combine both worlds. Like, Amy Winehouse was a huge inspiration to me.
Mm-hmm.
Tony Bear was a huge inspiration to me. And in the end, I got to work with.
Work with both when you came to that fork.
Yeah, totally.
That's cool. That is really cool. So with this new record, or the new EP that you have coming out, so
Mhm.
when did you start this? Like, obviously isolation hits again with COVID in 2020. And you talked about being super creative during that. Like, when you have those moments, did you feel that same way once the world shut down, or did you not get the same, creative vibe from obviously a forced isolation versus the other ways you wrote music?
I think, look, I was missing the inspiration that comes from just relating in the world.
Right.
That's where a lot of my music comes from. But luckily, I was like, I'm trying to make a different type of music, this music that is ceremonial and healing. And these were songs that had been kind of floating in my consciousness for many years that I'd
Hmm.
been wanting to make and put to recording. And this was like another really mystical coming about. during the pandemic, I had applied to get a master's in social work.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. I was like, maybe there's a way to combine therapy and music. And I was really deeply just like impacted by witnessing the mental health crisis happening.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was something I applied for and got accepted to a program in New York. And I was contemplating going, but I wasn't sure for a lot of reasons. And a mentor of mine was like, I think you should do this meditation practice where it just like set up a little altar and um, you have to give something up. So like, I gave up coffee. I don't really, for 10 days, and you meditate just for 30 minutes in the morning, 30 minutes at night, and you meditate with a question. So like my question was, what is the best path for me to be of service right now? And I had done a lot of writing on it, and I just sat in front of this altar every day for 10 days. And I was like, I was just trusting his guidance because I didn't know how it was going to play out. And on the 7th day, I had a missed call from a friend of mine who I'd met in an ayahuasca ceremony, who's a musician.
Mm-hmm.
And he left me a message, and he's like, I was just sitting and meditating and thinking about you and wondering when you're going to make your medicine record. And I called him and I was like, I really want to make it. I'm just not sure of the how to fund it, how to do it. And he was like, I'm going to help you make it. And he's a producer, and that was it. We started working together.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So you implemented those sounds and like the from the sound baths and all the other stuff that you were doing into this record?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. And wow. Okay. So the totally different approach. Was that hard to, write in that headspace? I guess I'm sure it's a lot different than putting the earlier records together.
It was a lot different because I'll tell you, it was different. It was the earlier records. It's like I would write the songs and then like we would figure the songs out in the studio. And some of the songs from this record were songs that I'd already been playing for years.
Okay.
It was more like, how do I do them justice in the recording process?
Uh-huh.
And the whole thing was really intuitive.
That's cool. And then how do you, to create a record, I guess my question would be like, did it come down to some of those frequencies? Was that stuff you implemented in the album, or is it no, just like, okay, I'm going to use these instruments that I know that I use during these healing sound baths and all that stuff. Like, how did you like tackle the record when it came to those specific things?
Yeah, I think we used a lot of my instruments that I use in sound baths to give it shape, and then also the lyrics were just songs that I had written. So lyrics were songs were I'm trying to figure out the best way to say this, like downloads I'd had in my personal work
Mm-hmm.
with plant medicines that I'd been wanting to give form to for a while. Things I'd written down years ago that I was like, one day this will find a song, and then they finally did. So
Amazing. That's so cool. And do you plan on like for this record, would you approach it differently when it came to like touring it, or would you want to, instead of playing maybe like a rock venue or like a different, would you like, are you going to do a different take on that?
for sure. I mean, I'm doing lots of like private events and private shows, but for like the bigger ones, I think I want to keep them in the experiential space.
Uh-huh.
And so yeah, like inviting people to lie down, or instead of being sitting and kind of rigid. I don't know. I see it like a lot of outdoor spaces.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see myself standing up. I see myself like sitting down and surrounded by my instruments and just getting to kind of do different things.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Amazing, amazing. And the record's coming out soon, right? Next week or so, a week after.
Oh, yeah. It's moving so fast. June 10th.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for doing this today. I really, really appreciate your time.
Yeah. Thank you so much for inviting me in and giving me the space to share.
Of course. This has been great. I have one more quick question. I want to know if you have any advice for aspiring artists.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. Definitely make your art. You owe it to yourself to see through your creations. I think one thing that is present right now as after this interview is like, and never be scared to reach out to somebody who you think might resonate with your music and be rogue. There's no there's no one way, there's no one path for anyone. So, trust your unique path.